Hello, California Trails and Greenways Conference. My name is Yves Zsutty. I'm a division manager with the Department of Parks, Recreation, and Neighborhood Services for the city of San Jose. And I've had the pleasure of working on trail projects for 20 years. And during that time, I have to admit, I've had plenty of wins and losses. I've worked with some really great professionals in our public works department, consulting agencies, and within our own Parks and Recreation Neighborhood Services Department to develop a 61-mile network of trails and have tried a lot of different things to make the projects cheaper, more quick to deliver, better for the user, and kinder to the environment. And so this presentation will review a number of uh, efforts that we've taken to develop that network and what we've learned along the way. So as an introduction, I want to go through mostly the design details, things that you're going to see, you're going to feel, you're going to experience along a trail. There's thousands of these decisions as you work on a project, but the primary focus on this topic is things that we've tried, but I'll also talk about some processes that we've worked on, community outreach, and the like. So let's get on with the presentation. Let's start with an experience where you're thinking you want to start trying something new. And in this instance, I'm showing you Albertson Parkway in San Jose. And at the time we were scoping this project, we had fully master planned it. We had our rights to be on the site. We were working with PG&E, our local utility, and we were ready to build a project. And the opportunity came up as to what type of base rock material and shoulder material we would use on the trail. And the option was presented to use a variety of materials, but one of them was recycled aggregate base. And intending towards caring for the environment, reducing waste, and repurposing materials, this seemed like a great option. And so we proceeded with that. And through construction, things were fine. The material compacted well and met our specs. It met all performance goals as we had defined them in our city specification documents. But once we had installed it, we realized there was something wrong with the product. And in this instance, you can see the dust and the material encroaching on the black asphalt paving. The material was really hard to compact and have it adhere to itself so that it was a stable material. What we found through this process was the act of recycling material was turning the aggregates, which should have been like puzzle pieces that would tie to each other and be tightly locked, so you've got a nice tight surface, into more of a bag of marbles. So all that recycling and tumbling of the material was making it hard for the product to adhere. We also were lacking the fine material that helps fill in the gaps, and we later found out that we needed to add lime as a form of adhesive to hold the product together. So this was not a complete catastrophe because over time the mulching on the side of the trail has encroached, the gravel base has really worn away, and so it's a conventional paved trail, but the shoulder is lacking. But we learned to be careful when using new ideas, and the lesson learned here was one of two. You might want to look at your project as a pilot project. And in doing so, what you want to do is communicate really clearly with your decision makers, your budget office, your council, that you're experimenting. And so you want to identify it as a pilot. So there's a sense that you're going to have findings and a determination whether the project is working well. And if you can, put money aside to make any needed repairs you might need to take care of if there was a problem. Had we had a pilot experiment on Albertson Parkway, we probably would have done a small section of the project instead of the full 1 mile project, and perhaps a couple hundred feet, tested it, and then had a budget of maybe $20,000 or $30,000 to go in and rebuild it once we determined whether there was failure or success. The other approach is to do some good studies, figure out what is available in the marketplace in terms of, in this case, the use of recycled pavements. So we were still committed to using materials, but what we found by doing a study was that recycled asphalt is actually a great material, and it binds quite well as it's reinvigorated into new asphalt paving. So we took a project site where there had been a very deteriorated temporary construction road, which people had perceived to be a trail, and we used it as our first test in the San Francisco South Bay area to test recycled warm mix asphalt, and it has performed very well over the last 10 years. So the study there helped us to make a well-guided decision. There's strategies for reducing cost on projects. This is our Lower Guadalupe River Trail. And when you're looking at 6.4 miles of project, you want to look at how to tighten up that budget whenever you can. So some ideas that we've had over time was that we were deploying call boxes at about 1 mile increments. We were paying for cell phone service. We were engaging our 911 center. There were a lot of staffing charges with it, but we started exploring that system and seeing if it was really performing. And what we found by talking to the 911 center was that none of the operators could remember ever having received a call. We knew that we had a number of call boxes where the line to the phone had been cut, and we were well aware that there were a lot of smartphones in the hands of users at this point. And you can tell from my graphic, the generation of iPhone here is quite old, but we did this a number of years ago. And what we found in San Jose was that the urban area is completely covered by cell phone coverage, which would be expected, and that some of our rural parks did not have that coverage. So our strategy with call boxes was to keep the call boxes that had to be hardwired in the regional parks, but eliminate about 50 call boxes throughout our network, and then replace them with mileage marker signs at 1/4 mile increments that would inform the user where they physically were. In this case, they're at mile 9.25 on the east side of the Guadalupe River. And so if they called for help, this would be seen as the 911 by the 911 center operator as an address on the roadway. So part of this project was to meld the trail map to the roadway map and make it a non-vehicle road in terms of their process, and have a physical address they can point to. Prior to this time, had there been an incident, the incident would have been reported not necessarily on the trail, but on a place that was probably 500 feet from the nearest roadway. So that makes it difficult to catch data about trail usage. It makes it hard for people to find people on the trails. And so that was an innovation that helped us save some money, both in terms of infrastructure and operationally. I'll show you too, as we started our experiment, the picture on the left was our initial mileage markers. They were 3-dimensional because we expected the police helicopter to be monitoring these corridors, and we needed something that could hold reflectance tape and be seen on all 3 sides. Over time, we found that these were getting tagged. They were, at a convenient location for that. They were costly, and they really weren't serving a need that we anticipated. So we standardized on a much cheaper pole-mounted sign, so it doesn't look as special as the original mileage marker, but it does everything. The same thing. The numbers are there, the location is there, the 911 data is all there. It's just in a more convenient, accessible, cheaper package. We've also experimented with striping, and striping can be costly. And what we wanted to do was address the fact that we can't light most of our trails. They're in riparian zones, so we can't light these corridors. So what we can do is think about ways that a bicyclist with a good light could see the trail at night. And that was through using highly reflective striping. We didn't have a formula available to us, so we worked with our Public Works Department and the Airport Department to look at the glass beads that are used on an airport. They're much higher reflectance than in the roadway. And we looked at the material itself. So in this case, the picture to the lower left shows typical thermoplastic striping, which has quite a dimension to it. And on a trail, you might trip someone, particularly someone on a skates or skateboard, or the elderly could be at risk. So we wanted a surface that was much thinner. And what we found was, in working with a vendor, and our Public Works Department, we created a formula that is ultra thin. It has no dimension. It can hold the glass beads fine, and it really helps light up the trail if you have a proper light. But our experimental experiment depended on use of a striping machine that was small enough for the trails, but there was only one unit available in the Bay Area that people were renting, and it wasn't very stable. So there was a lot of cost incurred by the contractors with the uncertainty of timing and reliability. And so we altered our formula so that it could be a different temperature, and so more equipment could be available to contractors to install it. So as you're experimenting, you may get to a great outcome, and you may need to pivot to make it even better. And in this case, we did have to continue changing to meet what the reality was in terms of the contractor supply chain. As more of a process here, when we work with developers, we found that trails can be built by developers, but there's some strategies we've used to make sure that we make that process easy, straightforward, and more likely for success. We start off by making them aware of our goals and our vision to be a national leader, so that they get the sense that what we're building here is something much broader than what's in the immediate neighborhood. We're looking at building a 100-mile trail network across San Jose with 62 miles already developed and 40 systems planned. And we focus our efforts on innovation, being data-driven, high quality, accessible projects. We do a lot of them through partnering, like with private developers or public agencies, and our pace development is rapid. And so there's a quality brand here that they can align with, and to help them be part of that, we have documents to show them where all the planned and future trail alignments are, and we can show that build out over time. Our goal right now is to get to 100 miles, but we have the potential to get to 155 miles. We've created a toolkit, which I'll reference a number of times in this presentation, and it can be a resource for you to find some tips and tricks that we have available. But the toolkit helps guide projects that offer the best experience to the user. They confirm all the details that we want to see in a project, the best practices, be careful when using recycled materials. We prefer our special striping formula, things like that. We talk to them about how they're going to convey documents to us so we can improve them quickly. And it will talk about how they work with our partner agencies who may be not familiar to a developer. One thing we've acknowledged over time is that residential developers build great housing projects. And when asked to build trails, it may be an entirely new type of project for them. So we don't have the assumption that they're going to know exactly how to work through this process. So that's where we can help them. We talked them through our process of development, which starts with identification of the project. It's on the trail map. It's a system that we've confirmed. We may ask them to do a study to see if a project is possible or not. We definitely want to be having them work on a plan for the project, which would have an environmental document. Then through the design phases where we have a lot of review and oversight, ultimately they will build it, or they will fund it and we'll build it for them. But the process is constant, and they can see the workflow and how they fit within it. Our strategic plan talks about this workflow, and that's another document that I'll reference through this presentation. And then the toolkit really takes someone through these core parts of the process. So as that work gets done, we're consistently building 12-foot wide trails. These are entirely off-street. So when I talk about 62 miles of trails, I'm not talking about the additional 400 miles of bikeways, on-street bikeways that we're developing in San Jose, and we have about 300 miles so far. And the desire to link these bikeways to the on-street, so people can get all over the city by biking or walking conveniently. The toolkit will talk to them about what we want to see in the project, what works, what doesn't work, very much like what we're talking about today. And when we're successful, this is a project that was built by a developer here, and these photos were just taken this month. We had them pull the guidance from the toolkit, which talked about this project being on the Guadalupe River Trail. So it's going to use our signature icon gateway, which is the compass, which is graphically correct to always point north. It both happens at the entry to the project and at a seeding point. And it's this node here in the upper left that's important, because that's at a point where we will connect to the rest of the Guadalupe River Trail over time. So the developer knows in building this, they're building a walking path right now, but it's going to be part of a regional trail as we find opportunities to extend onto it. I'll talk to you about now about making trails as a place unto themselves. I think often we can see a paved trail and it may be uncertain. Is it a maintenance road? Is it a public trail? Is it accessible? Is it not? And so we like to think of trails as having a proper entryway, a sense of entry and identity. This is again on the Guadalupe River by the airport. This is the closest you can get to an international flight taking off in North America. And so we thought this was an important point to reflect the airplane and the pavement detail, have a seating wall where it's not uncommon to see people with long lenses photographing planes taking off. That same location becomes a gathering point for people to meet. Here it was to celebrate the opening of the 6.4 mile trail system, and our interpretive panels are seen as cutouts of airplane wings. So if we've got a theme, we're really playing it up. Further along the trail for identity, we had the discovery of a mammoth. I think it was 30,000 years ago. A mammoth roamed here in the Silicon Valley. I hope I got my dates right here. And we coincidentally had this point on the trail that was pretty long distance with no destinations. So it was a great piece for a work of public art. So we work with the public art program, and we had this amazing 9-ton beast constructed and shipped to San Jose from Southern California. And the road trip up Highway 5 was pretty cool. We got some great photographs of that event. So now it makes a wonderful gateway and a destination along the trail. For all of our projects, I talked about the sense of the intent of a gateway. This is a water tank concept and reality. Left was the renderings we shared with the public, and on the right was the actual completion of the project. And this is part of the narrative on this trail system, the Three Creeks Trail, where we're talking about the history of the railroad in the community and how it was drawing the fruits of the Valley of Heart's Delight, which was Silicon Valley before technology arrived, where we were a major fruit producing center, and this product was carried out through the rails across the country. We also do placemaking through planting pallets and celebrating the native plants that we can make good use of here in California. Trails as transportation is something that we care about for a great deal for a number of reasons. Our general plan calls for a mode shift for more biking. We were part of the city's green vision, where we wanted to build our network to support alternative transportation. But we need to look at it more than just building the paved trail, but in terms of how to plan it well and making sure that it really helps people get to places. And getting places is a challenge because we've had some of these instances on the trail network where no one had records of this, and it's hard to piece what happened here. But out here on the Los Alamitos Creek Trail, we had a section of the trail that just went into a sound wall. So we've fixed this over time. But there's things like this in a network that clearly nobody wants, and they need to just be tackled. What we do know about our trail network is it's highly used for active transportation. Our data from our annual trail count, which we've been doing for 15 years, shows between 35 and 55% active transportation use or commuters on some of our long distance trails. This is attributed to lots of housing in the south through a downtown central core and a lot of Silicon Valley industry to the north. And that creates an opportunity for a lot of biking through the area. So as we look at that network, we take our inspiration from the US highway system, where you could cross through this network to get all over the country. And the idea of an interconnected trail network goes back about 20 years in San Jose, as it was a goal in our general plan, and we've stuck to it. And so we keep working on those projects like bridges and undercrossings and closing gaps to make these important connections. So where we stand today, back in 2001, we had 25 miles of Class 1 trails. Currently, we're at 62 miles, and that network is filling out. The dark green lines on the map to the right show where you can actually physically be on a trail, with the dotted lines being places that we've either identified, planned, or studied, or designed. And so these are upcoming projects. And our intent, again, is to get to 100 miles across the city, which will be highly distributed, network to just about every neighborhood in the city. And then we've got some wonderful rural hiking trails in some of our regional parks where you can really get away into nature, including in California's oldest civic park at Alum Rock Park. And we're proud to carry the brand of Bay Area Ridge Trail, Bay Trail, and the National Recreation Trail in this network. So I mentioned, the challenging projects. This is just one example. We built this trail to get under this freeway interchange. The structure that my coworkers could not walk comfortably beneath is the structure that you see, the lower structure here. So we dipped beneath that, and in doing so, we were also creating a situation where the adjacent river could funnel into the adjacent highway. So our project also included a flood wall adjustment and those added complexities. But to make projects work as a transportation routes, you often have to take on these complicated projects to make them fully connected. It also means we build bridges and undercrossings. We build new undercrossings. We retrofit spaces to travel underneath bridges. Always a lot of engineering, but this is what allows people to get through and not have to cross traffic and be more encouraged to bike. And we work really hard to keep our undercrossings at a relatively high water level so they don't flood seasonally and discourage that winter travel. And then for planning the network, we're not afraid to talk about the big projects that we can't possibly afford right now, but we're trying to get them on the books so that there's awareness. And so if there's regional measures, bonds, special new resources for biking and pedestrian travel, we've got some ideas in the works. This is a trail connection to get the Coyote Creek to span over Highway 237, a 6-lane freeway in the South Bay. The upper image was a bridge span to connect the Guadalupe River to the Guadalupe Creek in South San Jose, spanning over 9 lanes of County Expressway, and a major suspended structure over Highway 87 to connect the Three Creeks Trail from east to west. None of these have been built at this point. And so I don't want to discourage anyone, but they are images and inspirations and the showcasing of big ideas to encourage people to start thinking about what does it take to really build out an entire network. Going back to sense of place, I want to give you a few more tips here. And this is the idea of characterizing each trail system around a different idea. I talked about the Guadalupe River Trail and the compass icon. This compass icon appears throughout the network. So it starts in Alviso at the San Francisco Bay here at Gold Street, makes its way to downtown, and in the downtown area, it takes the form of tile mosaics, but it's still the compass icon. So keeping to those patterns really helps brand a trail and lets people really associate to it. And then as they go onto a new trail, they think of it, there's a new experience. So there's not a cookie cutter approach to the way we're doing our projects, but we do replicate the graphic throughout the network itself. So it gets used a lot, and people are familiar. When they see a compass, they're going to say, I'm on the Guadalupe. This is that same scene at eye level, and you can see the scale that we use, and we often accompany our gateways or midpoints along the trails to stories about the city. There's interesting tales to be told about San Jose, and here we talk about the community of Alviso, which is our port into the San Francisco Bay. Back to the Three Creeks Trail, we decided to tell that story in a little bit different way. We didn't use the conventional interpretive signs, but we used landscape to talk about the irises that were cultivated along the corridor in the past, and the sisters who grew them at an adjacent nursery just on the other side of a wall. We installed seating that looked like fruit crates. We created a custom bench that reflects on the Three Creeks by having 3 legs and 3 beams to sit upon. And then we have that water tank that I showed you previously with a great big 3 on it to just reinforce that branding. And so all of these elements tell a story as you go along the corridor. And so you're not necessarily reading about it, but you're experiencing things. So you have that memory as you try and learn more about this project. Or in other ways, we use materials and engineering to talk about a project. In this case, we had 2 challenges. along the Penitentiary Creek Trail, we had a lot of California native sycamore trees, which are endangered and had to be protected. So we needed a boardwalk structure. And the wood surface, the decking that you see in the lower left, wasn't there because there was a tree there, but it was a way to capture that material. So as people walked in this trail further and they reached the boardwalks, they could already see the continuity of design and materials. And then we included graphics that showed the boardwalk and the nature we were protecting, so people understood the correlation. And while we were there, we were also talking about both the 18th century, or I'm sorry, the 19th century visitors to Alum Rock Park, the humans who visited the park, and the fish species who still do by traveling up Penitentiary Creek. In all of our studies and master plans, we look for opportunities to reinforce that sense of place. So this is a study we have to revisit the San Francisco Bay Trail and the Highway 237 bikeway, and we're putting in a lot of imagery. So as we move on to more design work, these ideas get captured and they don't get missed. So I mentioned we collect data every year as part of our annual trail count, and this has been very valuable for us for a number of reasons. One is that we're able to track the pace of development. We're able to communicate to the council that projects are challenging to build. They don't build as quickly as we'd all like, but they can see forward momentum as we're building out our network. And we also show a breakdown of where the projects are in terms of development. The green to the right, the 36%, are projects that are open. And this pie is distributed in this way because we look at the 155-mile potential network. So we're over a third done, but there's still a lot of work, with near-term construction being the 1% and 6%, and design being 7%. But there's still about half a network here to build out. So we need to sustain that energy behind the council. They need to see progress. And by giving them graphics and numbers on a regular basis, they can see we're good investment because we can keep pace. We publish our data in with a quick fact sheet the day after our counts. People can see what's happened that year. And then we do a full narrative, about 30 or 40 pages, a few weeks after the event, to talk about what we learned, what was going on at the during the count, the survey findings, and our interpretation of that data. This was 2017, but we did it just this year. So we keep doing this data collection, and we're not shy about our data. If this back in 2017, we had a lot of decreases and not much increased traffic, but data is data, and so it got better the next year, and it kind of lagged the next, and so it's okay. It's just people need to see what's happening, and we're able to speak about what we perceive may be some of the challenges. Sometimes they're just an incident. Other times there's other challenges. This past year we had major fires in Santa Cruz Mountains above San Jose, and our trail count day was the day that the skies were bright orange and people were just trying to stay at home. So we had that working against us. Collecting data is valuable. This is a number of years ago, we had pulled in $600,000 that year. We've pulled in millions of dollars in grants each year. And often it's because we can point to the value of trail count in predicting how much usage we expect by either extrapolating how the data mirrors a parallel trail we want to build, or how closing a gap can have a significant increase. By collecting the data and asking the right questions, you can start figuring out how to answer those future questions that seem often challenging. And often when we do trail count, we can say, well, we had 800 users over a 12-hour period. And 800 doesn't seem like a big deal when you think about that a California freeway can carry, I think, 3,300 cars an hour per lane. So we find ways to interpret that data. So by using the Rails Trail volume calculator, we can project that almost 900,000 people make trips on the Guadalupe River Trail in this instance back in 2017, and we're at about 900,000 now. So this makes the number, I think, more powerful, and it is still accurate. It's just a representation of usage over a year rather than a day. And these are how we show those counts for all our trail systems. And then finally, as you do trail counts, it takes a lot of effort. You know, it seems like a great day, you've done your counting, but it's probably taken 2 or 3 weeks of getting ready, getting volunteers, a few months beforehand doing your surveys. So don't lose the opportunity to make sure you compile your data and you get the word out. In our example here, we put out fact sheets. We make it a core part of our annual report to our council. We get it out to our advocates. We use it in all our grant writing. So find the value in the efforts that you take on. When we do public outreach, we get a lot of interest in trails. And I can say over 20 years that it's gone from not my backyard often to when is this project actually going to get built? And so we work with the community through feasibility studies, through master plans. We often don't go to the community during the design phase because we already have our project defined by the master plan. But if there's community interest and maybe there's a key question, we might take it back to them. But we try and get it into the design and get it designed quickly so we can build it. It's important with these community meetings that you don't lose sight that your project may be from point A to B, but it's part of a larger picture. So we spend a lot of time talking about how it adds to the overall network, how trails are going to be across the entire city, how we've done great projects already, and we share our portfolio and show them what we've been able to accomplish and how they've positively changed neighborhoods. And we give the larger context so people can see that this may be a gap closure or it's an extension and how it fits into a larger area. We have also created a strategic plan which helps the community see that if we had more staffing and resources, we could advance trails more quickly. And they can also see, why does it take so long to get a project built? Why does it cost so much? And why do we need the projects at all? And the strategic plan goes into a lot of the reasons and the values of having trails. And this is a useful resource for people, not necessarily people who are opposed to a project, but people who may be on the fence or just want to know more than just the immediate project. Then we offer perspectives. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of competitiveness. So we like to look to other cities that are highly respected for their bikeway and trail programs and see how we add up. And so we've looked at Portland, Minneapolis, and Austin, and we'll share with the community that San Jose technically has more on-street bikeway trails, meeting that Caltrans classification, than cities like Portland, which count their on-street bikeways. We don't. We keep that as a separate inventory. We also do quite well about the same against Minneapolis. We have more off-street trails than Minneapolis does for their records. And then we have about, less than Austin. So that's good. Austin is our economic competition, Silicon Valley. So we've got something to really reach towards there. But this is just useful for the community to also see that bikeways and trails are being built throughout the nation, and we're doing quite well to keep up. And we want to be frank about challenges. There's a lot of interest in certain trail systems. People enjoy popular systems, they want to see them built, but often we can't move forward because there's a major flood control project on the books and it may not be fully funded or fully designed. And we want to really follow that effort. So we don't build something that has to be destroyed in the short term. In this instance, this isn't flood control as much as just seasonal maintenance, but this was a trail that we'd planned. We were designing it when we really got a better understanding of what our local water district was doing in the waterway on an annual basis. And we've always partnered with them, great data sharing of resources. We actually have rights to use their land through joint trail agreements, but we hadn't really understood the full scope of what they had to do annually to keep this riverway functioning. And so the excavation and piling of mud on the side of the creek banks where we were planning to build a trail made our project ultimately infeasible. Luckily, we could go to the other side of the creek, build them a pipeline, find a dual use solution there, and sustain public access and a trail during these seasonal cleanups. So we found a win-win, We shared resources, and we had a great partner here with the Santa Clara Valley Water District. But it's important for the community to know these challenges because there's often a perception that you can step into a natural place and build a project. Few constraints, easy to go. And so they need to know about these types of complexities. And projects like the Toolkit, the document that I've mentioned, are also helpful, where people can see the workflow. Both the developers can see that as they look at their projects, but the community can look at these project documents also to see what it takes to get a project right. In working with partners, I mentioned the Water District. They've been fantastic. We've had a collaborative action plan with them since 2003, and that has allowed us to get access to their property at no cost. We assume full responsibility and liability for the recreational trail users, and we defend them in court on that aspect. Again, we get the free land, and it's generally a very good deal for both of us because there is an expectation on their part that the community wants access to their property, so we can be their agent in that way. But we've also worked a lot with the PG&E utility to build trails underneath their corridors that otherwise are empty space with high power lines. So it's a good dual use. And we've worked with Caltrans to build trails along their freeways, which we've converted from their mitigation project to our bikeway and trail, or we've gotten rights from them to actually extend trails to their property. In working through those projects, we've learned a great deal. And I think the first tip here is to know the jurisdictions that you're working with, the regulatory agencies, and those other government bodies that have influence on your project. In this case, we've charted out or borrowed a graphic from agencies that talk about their responsibilities, so we can see where agency jurisdictions fit and what their motivations are. And so as we look at a project, we try and minimize those permits by being strategic where we put the project, and also be aware of what are those interests for those agencies so our project doesn't go counter to those interests. Our toolkit, again, talks about those agencies, talks about their motivations, the types of permits they need, and this can help you as a designer or a planner, a developer, or just a community member of interest know what are the key points that might stop or delay a project, and what would be a clever way to just avoid them by maybe changing an alignment or avoiding a condition. Now, I'll mention this case study here. I'll go back to the Albertson Parkway project. This was a project with the recycled shoulders, the gravel shoulders. We were traveling underneath utility power lines. It was a win-win in this case. They had dumping, they had motorcycle trespassing, they had issues in their corridor. Parks and Rec, we came in, we became the operator, we're the eyes and ears of this project, and we activated the site. And we activated in a way that didn't present liability for PG&E, because what we did was alter their poles to put on anti-climbing devices. We kept a minimum distance from their utility poles. We limited vehicle access into the area. And ultimately that reduced their operational costs. And we didn't build any infrastructure that could be damaged. So they continue to have free access to their property. Landscaped was held back from their key infrastructure, no seating, no concrete walls, nothing there that could be in their way and would be destroyed at a cost to us. So it was useful, and the community now comes to us for the issues and challenges rather than them. So I think they're a winner, and we're a winner because we have a continuous alignment that takes us to the beautiful foothills. And then finally, I'll go through some common details here. There's lots of things to think about on projects. I'll mention a few where we've learned a few lessons. The first is on bollards. Steel bollards can weigh a lot, and they cause back injury. They're hard for staff to deal with, and we'll have to find them kind of thrown off to the edge of the trail because they're such a pain to remove from day to day. We worked with a local vendor to come up with an aluminum bollard. It weighs probably 10 pounds at most. We chain it and secure it because it's so lightweight, but that allows us to daisy chain our parks key, water district key, Caltrans key if needed. And the two handles make it easy for someone to pick up and remove this. And when the bollard is removed, there's a trap door so the trail surface is level, so there's no tripping hazard. So that's an opportunity where you can work with a local vendor to, if you got enough purchasing might, to really have something custom created. And so we buy these now for all our trails, and it's really been a savings for reducing employee risk of injury, and it's an item that we can use throughout our infrastructure, so we can buy it in quantity. Over time, we've shifted away from concrete fencing, which is low maintenance, and at first, easy to put in place and highly durable. But what we found was once a part was broken or fell out of place, it was like putting a puzzle back together. And so now we've gone back to natural materials, but quite hefty timbers, so they're very difficult to set on fire, well bolted together, so really hard to pull apart. And the aesthetic, I think, fits better to these natural environments where we have our projects. We've created our own signage guidelines, which not only have a common look, dimension, and character, but also include guidance on minimum heights from the ground, on stacking, so we avoid these odd collections of signs that are improperly placed. And my example here to the right is not the best because we're branding 3 trail systems that are all happening at this gateway. Typically, you'd see the trail name and the trail rules, and it's simple. Here, we're proud that we've got a trail through Shady Oaks Park, we've got a Coyote Creek Trail entry, and we've got the Odette Morrow Trail, which is a memorial. So lots of signage going on here. So a little sign clutter. Our guidelines will tell you never to do this. So follow our guidelines. These bollards to the left were kind of a condition we'd see from time to time. If there'd been trespassing, there seemed to just be an abundance of caution to start throwing tons and tons of barriers in place to prevent vehicles or motorcycles from coming into an area. We now really open up the corridors. We're looking more towards enforcement to reduce traveling. And we put in bollards only as needed. So we look for the incident to occur before we really take that action, because we want to avoid having hazards in the travel way. And I think with the gateways and good signage, it conveys to the law-abiding that this is a trail, so you shouldn't trespass. And for those who are not abiding by the law and traveling through, we keep an eye on them with enforcement, and ultimately would put in bollards if we had to, but they would never be to the extent that you see on to the left. We document consistency so that we've got reference materials, so we are using consistent materials throughout, so we avoided the complexity of having to repair non-like items. I mentioned the strategic plan, the toolkit, and our idea of the trail network. If you go to the San Jose Trails website, search for San Jose Trails, you get to the Parks and Rec website. In our policy and documents page, you'll find these materials, or you can always contact me, and I'm happy to send you links or answer questions about these documents. And with that, I will be happy to answer questions. Thank you so much for your attention, and happy trails.